You realize you're probably the only guy I've ever had in here whose dad probably paddled my butt.
I've had a lot of people tell me that, believe it or not. They walk up to me and say, yeah, your dad busted my butt.
Great way
I'm
to
like,
start
oh,
off the
okay.
interview.
Yeah. And most of them always really thought, he made me a better guy.
You bet.
So that's interesting you say that.
Well, I think I only had your dad 1 year. Didn't he retire 79 or 80?
He retired 81, I think.
81, okay.
Somewhere around there. Yeah. And he'd been Garland High School's principal for 12 years.
Wow.
And he'd been at Garland High School since 1955.
Wow.
Started there as a coach and had a lot to do with me as far as the way I do things, because growing up as a coach and principal and all that, you can imagine what it was like at home.
Oh, yeah.
My whole family being in the school business. But he had a whole lot to do with the way my ethic and work ethic and all of that came up, being a principal and all, growing up in the school business.
Good guy. I probably didn't get paddled. God, I don't think I got paddled till
Well, I did, so I got enough for both of us.
Oh, I got them at home.
Yeah.
So it was no big deal. My parents had paddles too, so it's like that. If you got paddled at home or at school, you got paddled at home.
Exactly. Yeah.
Man.
Yep.
Look, if you deserve it, you deserve it. Tradesmen built America. Not policymakers or desk jockeys, but hardworking, blue-collared men and women. Join me, Roger Wakefield, on conversations with some of the nation's most successful skilled laborers. This is the Trade Talks. What made you decide to get into the trades? Because you actually wanted to be a doctor.
Purely accident. So all my life, I'd been planning on being a doctor. My mom told me, I want you to be a doctor growing up. And I liked that stuff. I grew up looking at it, watching doctor shows, everything. Started pre-med in college. Went through all my chemistry, anatomy, all those classes. But the difference in that is I met my wife, my high school sweetheart, what turned out to be my wife now, almost 44 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We fell in love and got married right out of high school, which changed things a lot. Not that I would do anything to go back and change that, but we were both going to school full-time, working part-time. Backing up a little bit, before that, in high school as a football player, I played football all through, as back then from 5th grade all the way up through high school. And one summer we were working out at Garland High School, Williams Stadium, and a guy drives up and talks to our coaches in a lawn sprinkler van. And he's starting a new lawn sprinkler company. He said, hey, can I get a couple of football players to dig ditches for me all summer? And we're like, hey, that'd keep us in good physical condition all summer. We get paid for it. We'll be in good shape next fall for football. So we did that and worked all summer in it. By the end of the summer, he was dropping off 2 16-year-olds and putting in lawn sprinklers, the entire system.
That's fun.
Trench it, dig it, wire it, you name it.
Yeah.
And so we were doing that. So I did that for 2 summers. So I had a little bit of plumbing teaser right there, but still was planning on being a doctor. Went on ahead and started college after my wife and I graduated. I was a year older than my wife, and she had another year of high school, so we were going to get married the year she graduated. And I was still working lawn sprinklers at that time. At the end of 79, when I graduated, they were doing a remodel on Garland High School, and my dad hung out with them all the time. He would go outside, chew tobacco, smoke cigarettes, cigar, and hang out with the construction guys. And he got to know the plumbers, and he started talking to them one day and said, hey, you think you give my son a part-time job as plumbing? And I was like, well, I've been doing sprinklers. How hard could it be to transition to plumbing? And I thought it'd be cool, something more to learn. And so I started working for a company called H&G Mechanical back then, and they're still in business today. They're different owners, but some really great guys named Bill Holder and Jim Gilliland that owned it. And they gave me a chance, started working at, I think I was making $4 an hour as an apprentice that they hired in. And they were very gracious. I came in at 1 o'clock, went to school from 7 in the morning till 12, and was taking 16 hours. Took them, they let me work from 1 to however long I wanted to. And then I'd work Saturdays, and it was great. Wife and I were married now. She was going to school full-time. I was. She was working also. Both of us were like, it was killing us. And something really needs to change. Neither one of us is ever going to complete school if one of us doesn't stop. And I said, this plumbing gig's not so bad. I kind of like it. And I said, it's probably the closest thing I'm ever going to get to being someone's doctor, and I could probably make a pretty good living at it. And I said, doing service plumbing, we see you have personal questions with people, you talk to people, everything else. Of course, I started off in commercial construction, but I realized what I was doing to start let me back up. Starting plumbing there, I started with H&G, and I said, it's not so bad, but if I do this, I don't want to work for somebody all my life.
Right.
I said, talked to my wife, and I said, let's just say this. If I go to plumbing, I want to have my own company by the time I'm 25. And at this point, I was 19, maybe 20. And, it scared my wife to death thinking, starting your own business and all of this, and that's crazy. But that's what I set my goal at. And in 1984, I started Butler Plumbing Company. I got my master's license. I started it. Now, the difference about that back then was I was doing all commercial work for my company, but I was doing residential service on the side. I had my master's license. I had my company established.
Okay, now hold on. You're getting way too far right now.
Okay.
What made you pick plumbing? The fact that your dad got you the job there?
Well, I had always been mechanical with my hands.
Okay.
From growing up, I worked on cars.
You bet. Did your dad work on cars too?
He did.
See, he didn't. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
My dad, when it's time to change the brakes, the alternator, the starter, fuel pump, whatever, it's like, hey, Roger.
Yep.
And it wasn't, hey, do you want to help? It's, hey, come on.
Exactly. Yeah. No, not at all. It wouldn't, son, this weekend we're going to do the brakes on the car.
Yeah.
And I was like,
get
okay,
ready
Dad,
for it.
or we're going to cut wood this weekend, or we're going to do something. It wasn't ever, son, do you have time to do this? It was, we're going to do this weekend. And we were doing it. Like you said, it was the brakes, the starters, the car, the engines. We'll always change our own oil, everything. And it was a necessity at that time. My dad grew up that way, and they fixed all their own cars.
Mine too.
And I still changed my own oil up until a few years ago.
So once you got into plumbing, you're working at Garland High School, same place you graduated from.
Yep.
What was it you loved about it? This video is sponsored by Leak Pro. Go check out leak-pro.com.
Well, again, using your hands, mechanical, plus figuring things out. We were reading blueprints. It was a whole new thing, learning everything about it. And when I first started plumbing, I thought, to do something like a high school, there must be 50 plumbers on this job. There was 3 of us to do the high school. And I was like,
and one of you is brand new.
Yeah. And I was just blown away. I said, well, how can 3 plumbers put all the plumbing in this high school?
You bet.
And so I had a guy that was my mentor named Rudy Monti. He was born in America, but his parents were full-blood German, and he was he was a very hard guy to work for, but he looked like a big Santa Claus with no beard. Just shaved Santa Claus' head and shave his face, and that's what Rudy looked like. He was about 6'3", big red face, and had a huge grin, and he taught me everything. He took the time to teach you. He was an incredible mentor. He had grown up in the Navy and doing houses during during the Korean War and all of that, and working on all of that. And he was so good at teaching. That's what started me on it, is that I really liked him. If I had a different person that I was working under, probably would have been a whole different ball game.
You bet.
But the fact that I got him, they put me with him, learned it tremendously. I enjoyed seeing something after I'd done it. We did high schools, we did all that, and producing something. And also, that's one of the reasons I ended up going to service plumbing. Commercial plumbing is great. I can drive down the roads and say, hey, I did that building, I did this building, I did that one. But the thing about residential plumbing, which I got into, and I'm probably getting ahead again, but is the fact that it's one-on-one interaction.
You bet. You
help people.
You bet.
You get to see that satisfaction from someone. And that's a whole different ballgame in commercial. But back up to that is I liked working with my hands. I liked building things. I liked plumbing too. It was hard work. You were always out in the heat digging. One of the first years, the year I got married in 1980, I was working middle of the summer, the hottest summer ever.
You bet. 113 degrees.
113 degrees. I got married on the hottest day of the year, June 27th.
I'll be dang.
We got married on that day. I took a week off that time, but we were working outside on a new construction slab during that time. So there's nothing harder that I'd ever gotten into than what plumbing was. But it's just something I fell in love with. I like to work in my hands. I like to do it. I like seeing the product after we finished and learning more about it. I was just soaking it up like a sponge. I wanted to learn everything. So I was an apprentice for 2.5 years. Back that time, you had to have your journeyman, 3 years to get your journeyman.
6,000 hours.
Yep. They accepted my lawn sprinkler work that I'd done also. So I got my journeyman at 3 years. And of course, back then, you could get your master's 1 year after your journeyman. There was no such thing as a tradesman.
Right.
And you could get your master's right then. So I got my master's a year to the date that I had my journeyman date because I was wanting it so bad. I was just wanting to soak up everything I could. And again, I wanted my own company, so I needed that master's to do that.
Okay, so you're learning from this big German. Love the way he teaches. And me, like you said, had it not started that way, it might have been different.
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky because the first plumber I worked with was a pain. He didn't want me to read blueprints. He didn't want me to stand next to him. So I got on the other side of the sheetrock because, of course, we're using the sheetrock as a table.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm learning to read blueprints upside down. But I was watching. It's like, okay, why is he looking? Why is he looking at that? And it's like, okay, that's that column. And I'm trying to figure it out. So the first plumber that I worked with was hard to work with, but he's a really good plumber. And later, Austin Speak, one of his brothers, worked with him, and Austin wanted to teach you everything. Austin wanted to show you not just how to do it right, but why we do it that way.
Absolutely.
And man, that was huge. And me, I'm lucky because of the people that I worked around. But one thing I ask people, what made you want to be really good? You knew you wanted to go to work for your own company. That idea never crossed my mind. I have no idea why. My parents weren't entrepreneurial. I say that they had a little side business, but what made you, where did you realize, look, if I'm going to do this, I want to be really, really good at it?
Well, again, my dad was a coach and I grew up in football, and everything everything I did, I wanted to be the best at. I wanted to be the best in school. I wanted to be the best I wasn't willing to put the time in to be valedictorian or anything, but I graduated high at tops of my class. I was senior class president. I wanted to be doing things and in charge of what was going on. I didn't like being told what to do all the time. I liked being in charge. And from the football training and the coaching and all of that all my life and everything, it was always, if you're going to do something, you do it to the max. Well, I don't care what it is. And that's kind of just what got instilled in me. So if I did plumbing, I wanted to be one of the best plumbers there were around here. I was very fortunate. At that time, H&G was in a growing phase, and they hired, most people don't know him. There was a guy named Gary Rambo, who's one of the smartest plumbers I ever knew in commercial work, and did some things I couldn't believe. We had Rudy and Lynn Penn and the Penn brothers, and they had all come together at Milestone. At H&G, and it was like having the smartest group of plumbers that you could ever learn under at one place. They had hired them from other companies. Some of the other companies were very upset at that time that we had those people and pulled them away from other companies. And we started growing, and we're doing a lot of great things. And so I had some of the greatest people to learn from, and I just wanted to be, I was like, I want to be the best plumber at this company. And I was one of the youngest also, definitely the youngest master they had. So that's just what it was. It was always instilled in me if you're going to do something, don't do it halfway.
Mm-hmm.
Do everything you can to do the best you can. Learn everything you can about it. I bought a code book right when I was an apprentice. From back then, Dallas had its own code book.
Right.
Uniform Plumbing Code. I read that book cover to cover. And believe me, that's some boring reading when you start reading the code book. But I was familiar with it, and I knew it. And, when I would have inspectors on the job site, I would carry the code book around with me on my commercial jobs. And that's what it was. It's just I wanted to be the best I could be at it, no matter what I did.
You grew up learning commercial, around some great plumbers. What was your favorite thing to do on commercial jobs?
Oh, man. Rough ends.
I know it's a long time ago.
Long time ago, boy. 47 years I've been doing plumbing now.
Yeah.
Probably rough ends. I liked roughing in new construction. Well, let me back up. Rough ends, but mechanical rooms. What make the heartbeat of the building.
You bet.
I love doing boilers, setup rooms, all of that. In fact, that's what I would do. I would ask him, I say, come on, Gary, give me that. I want that mechanical room.
You bet.
If we're going to do this job, you give me that. And he did most of the time. So I love doing that. It was like making art. You put all this pipe together, thousands of pipes in one room.
You bet. And make them all
look about it. Yeah.
Make them all look good.
But that had to be the thing I loved to do the most was mechanical rooms.
I love that. So at the age of 25, start your own company.
Yep.
Already had your master license, got it done well in advance.
Uh-huh.
Didn't wait till the last minute like a lot of people do. And see, me, I had no intentions of getting my master's. Like, look, I'm plumbing. Unfortunately, I was one of those plumbers that are a product of the school system. You get up, you go to school, you learn, you clock in at 8, you get out at 4. I became that kind of plumber. Okay, I got my license, just let me go plumb. And it was years later that I realized, education can change the way you look at things, the amount of money you make, the job offers you get. It can change so many things. So that's when I started learning and growing. But you've been doing commercial, and now you decide to open a residential service company.
Yep.
Kind of a little twist on it, isn't it?
Well, this is the thing. Commercial to me, this not all these people believe this way, but commercial to me is the best foundation you can get to become a plumber. I got to do a hotel. I did schools. I did Royal Oaks Country Club. I got to do lease finish out. I did several parking garage, 2, 3, 4 stories in the ground and 4 stories out of the ground, 5 stories. I got to do several of those. So I had a huge foundation on plumbing. And so I knew code. I knew everything about how plumbing should be installed. I knew how to read blueprints. Of course, you come to residential, you throw all that out the door.
Oh, yeah, you don't need any of that.
But the blueprints, not what, a drawing?
You bet.
And so I had all of that as a foundation as how to install everything properly, where you have engineers looking at everything and everybody else scrutinizing all your work. Well, then you go to residential and nobody looks at it. You just have to make sure to do it. But I carried that over. I always said, I want to have the best plumbing company. Well, my goal even back then is someday I want to be the biggest, best, largest plumbing company that does the very best plumbing job and takes the best care of customers. And that was always my goal. And the thing about commercial work, you see the same guys every day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was on jobs 9 months to a year at a time.
Oh, yeah.
On some of my jobs. And so you see the same guys all the time. And it's gratifying to do the work, but there's nothing like helping people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get to my company, and I started it 2 years early. I told my owners of my company, most people, you don't do side work. But my side work had nothing to do with the commercial. I went to work at 7, got off at 3:30, and I went to work on Butler Plumbing at that point and worked till 9 o'clock that night. And I had these dreams. I wanted to buy my house. I wanted a bass boat. I wanted all those things. And I said, I'm going to work, and I'm young right now. My wife and I don't have kids. We're going to make a place so that when we do have kids, she can stay home with them was my goal and hers. And so that's what I did. I started my residential 2 years early. I started it in 84, but I worked till 86 for the commercial company. So I still had that steady income easing into my own company and establishing it. I met with some people. It was kind of funny. Even the owners of H&G had me doing all their friend jobs for architects and engineers and everything. I was going to their houses and fixing all their plumbing for free for company relations. So they were fully on board with it. They knew, and I'd never hidden, that someday I'm going to go into my own business. But in the meantime, I did a great job for them too. So that's how it started. I eased into it. I got going. 86, I pulled the trigger. Things were real slow in the economy at that time anyways. H&G actually pulled me to the office. I was working drawings, doing takeoffs, all of that sort of thing. And I was just like, y'all really don't need me here anymore. I've got my other company going.
Not a plumber anymore.
Yeah. I don't want to be in this office doing this.
Yeah.
Y'all got other people that can do this. Y'all are just keeping me on. They were great. They kept me on. Through hard times, they were going to keep me busy no matter what.
Right.
But I said, it's time. Let's just part ways. And we did. And I still did their service work for years. All their rental properties, everything. I did Bill Holder's and Jim Gilliland's work for years.
I like that.
And still friends with them. So I became a service plumber for residential.
That's pretty cool. Now, take just a second and tell everybody who you are and what you do now.
I'm David Butler. I'm the Responsible Master Plumber for Milestone Home Services. We are about 750 employees. We run about roughly, trucks and all, about 70 trucks now that from plumbing. In 8 years, we've gone from 3 trucks to 70 trucks. By no means did I do that on my own. Have an incredible team at Milestone. The owners of Milestone, yes, Gus and Mark are incredible owners. The day that I sold my company to them in 2015 and established at that time, my goal had always been I wanted to be, as I said earlier, the largest, biggest, best plumbing company that took the very best care of customers. I was not in the market to sell my company when I did.
Right.
I was rolling along, steady, 6-truck, profitable plumbing company, and had some other things going on the side with my daughter that kind of just kept me at I just want to stay status quo where I'm at right now. But I still always had that dream in the back of my head. And Milestone gave me a call and said, we've been thinking about it, and we've been wanting to start a plumbing division in 2015. And you were the one that came to mind that we'd like to run it and have your company. And part of the reason was this. I don't know if there was another plumbing company in the Metroplex I would have sold my company to at the time. I knew Gus and Mark just as business acquaintances. We were both part of a group called Success Group International. And we'd both joined it the exact same year, exact same month, in 2004 in December, and became a part of it. And it teaches a whole mindset on customer service. It doesn't teach you how to do plumbing or electrical.
Right.
It teaches you a mindset on how to take care of customers and how to be a profitable company to do it. Up to that point, I wasn't as profitable as I'd like to be. And at 2004, I was staying in business. I had a great customer base and everything else, but I wasn't thriving. I wasn't making a good living at it. I didn't feel like to be putting in the time I was.
And a lot of guys that are plumbers, HVAC techs, roofers, electricians, tradespeople. We have my first coach was Michael Gerber, who wrote the E-Myth books.
Mm-hmm.
We have that entrepreneurial seizure. Hey, look, man, I'm out running a truck. I'm doing $1 million in sales a year. And I ain't making $1 million.
Exactly. Yeah.
I need to go to work for myself. That way I can make $1 million. And they all think that.
Uh-huh.
They don't understand what it takes to run a business, even what it takes to run a truck. I was involved with SGI, so I understand the coaching, the mindset, I remember one of the first times I went over and talked to Gus, being part of that group, you can mentor and talk to each other.
Absolutely.
And all that. I remember walking in, talking to Gus, and he's like, bring your price book when you come. And I walk in, I lay my price book down. He says, I ain't even got to open it. He said, you're not charging enough. I'm like, now, how do you know that? He says, nobody is.
Yep.
I said, but you ain't even looked at my numbers. So he opened it up. He said, yeah, you're definitely not charging enough. And I'm like, how do you know? He said, do you really understand what it costs you to do business and what it costs you to hire the best plumber and what it costs to do this and I mean, it was probably a 30-minute conversation. And I was just like, wow. And I mean, even back then, and it's funny because the first thing Gus said, he said, you will always be able to run a better plumbing company than me. And I'm like, why is that? He said, because I don't talk plumbing. I'm not a plumber, you do. He says, I've hired some great people. He says, so we'll do it. He said, but you will always be able to run a better plumbing company than I would. And I'm like, wow, man, what a great way to look at it. Man, to just sit and talk with him and learn. Number one, like I said, great guy. I love the way his mind works. Love the way he thinks. Love the fact that it's a faith-based company. And it's like, look, we've got our beliefs and we got the way we do things. And man, when somebody looks at you like that and says, hey, you're not charging enough, then you go back to your office and say, hey, we got to raise our prices. Everybody's like, we can't raise our prices.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we got to. It's like, no, God, we can't. We're fighting this all day, every day. It's like, look, we got to raise our prices. So it's interesting. What did you first think when you came to work at, number one, they're a bigger company because they were already doing electrical. What was that
largest
like?
Electric company in the Metroplex at the time I hired in, and they started AC 2 years earlier, HVAC. The thing was this, it was such an easy transition because of what you just said. Both of us were in the same position. They were in 2004, they were at like I'm either going to get rid of this company or I'm going to go to work for someone else, or I got to fix it. And that's when I joined STI. And that was the first thing we learned. We were all priced wrong. And there's still so many plumbing companies in the Metroplex that are. And people look at us and they say, y'all are priced so high. Well, it's not that we're priced so high. We're priced right.
Mm-hmm.
And the other companies are struggling and they're going to go out of business eventually. And so you get priced right. Like you said, the first thing they told me, they looked at my price guide and they said, my Lord, you're so underpriced.
And you were already at SGI, so you already knew that.
Yeah.
You just hadn't decided, look, okay, I'm just going to raise my price to what it should be.
Yeah. And so I came over to Milestone, and it was such an easy transition because, again, I wouldn't have sold mine anywhere else either, though, because of my number one thing, and I teach this every day in class, is what is our number one thing we think about every time we go into a call, and that is taking care of the customer.
You bet.
No matter if it costs us money or if it makes us money, we're going to take care of that customer. And they believe the same way. And when I went over there, I told them, I said, I have a certain ethics that I do plumbing to. And there's a lot of companies sometimes, that they try and rule their master plumber.
Mm-hmm.
They say, well, this is going to cost us too much money. We're not going to do that. We're going to cut corners. Gus and Mark have supported me. Never once have they tried to do that. We've talked about things. Is there something we can do that may save us money here and there? And there's always those ideas in business, but never.
And if you're not asking those questions as a business, you're not a good business.
Exactly.
I mean, you're not.
Yeah. No. And that's one thing Gus he's an incredible businessman. I mean, he comes up with ideas, and some of them work, some of them don't. Everybody does that.
You bet.
But more of them work than not. And that's why Milestone has grown so fast. And the largest home service company, well, basically the largest family-owned home service company, can't talk, in America or in the United States. They're not publicly traded or anything else. Most of our larger companies around here now have been bought by corporations.
And I want to talk about that because I saw a very interesting post on TikTok the other day, and it was about that exact thing. And it's like a lot of these mom and pop companies, family-owned companies, local companies are being bought out by these VC groups, which are basically owned by Wall Street.
Yep.
And now when you think you're hiring a local company, chances are really you're just sending your money straight to Wall Street.
Yep.
And they've realized, number one, the trades are essential. You're not going to do anything without them. It's going to be forever. I don't see AI coming in and changing a flapper.
Not yet.
Sure. And I've got to have that conversation next week. But you look at, I love, Gus mentioned that when he was in here. He says, look, I'm still family owned. It's us. Even me, when I sold to Rescue Air, it was family owned then, but now they're looking at expanding and changing and doing different things.
Uh-huh.
To be a locally owned company, you're keeping your money local. I mean, the employees are local. We get that. But the big profit margins aren't being sent to New York to invest in other things. I love the fact that it's family owned, and they do a lot of family owned stuff or family oriented stuff through the company.
Absolutely. And again, that's why it was I wasn't even thinking about selling my company. They called me. They said they thought about me. And at the position I was in right then, I had a business going with my daughter, and I was still looking at that dream. I'm like, there's my avenue to build the largest, best plumbing company in the Metroplex that I'd always dreamed of.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and on top of that, it's exactly aligned with my beliefs. They believe in taking care of customers. In fact, they took it to another level than what I had even been taking care of customers. And that's why my guys talk to me. They say, yeah, I went to an old Butler customer today, and she talks about you so much. And, I walk into some of those old people and they'll give me a hug.
You bet.
We say, have you hugged your plumber today? But it's great. And that's why I went into residential service, because of that interaction and to have customers for 30 years. And that's the way Milestone is. They believe exactly the same way. So it was an easy transition. And with the support that they have and with the growth that we've had, when we started, I was doing everything.
You bet. Oh, no, I remember.
I was the one manager in the office.
Uh-huh.
I had one assistant that I brought with me. I brought 2 plumbers with me. Kind of thinned out my herd before I came over and got the best people with me. I've still got one of my plumbers with me who's a master plumber that sits right behind me as one of my managers in the office right now. He's doing great too. And it's just, it was an easy transition. I love that I did it, and I love where we're going. I've probably got a good another 6 or 8 years still doing plumbing there, still trying to get it to where I want it to be. I think right now we're probably the second largest in the Metroplex.
Now 6 or 8 years, you're going to be getting close to 70.
I am, yeah. I'm hoping I'm still able to do it at that point.
Because I'm 60. So yeah, I know you're about 4 years older than me. My plan is when I turn 65. So I've got 4.5 years to do what I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
But, let's talk about that real quick, because the average age for plumbers in Texas is about 58 years old. Me and you are both above that average.
Yep. And that's crazy, isn't it?
It is, because I still feel 40 years old.
Yeah.
I know. How'd you other guys get to be that old?
I know. Yeah.
I heard that one day and I thought, well, thank God I'm not. It's like, oh, wait, I am. And we'll talk more about it in a little bit, but we're going to be losing a lot of plumbers here in the next 4 to 7 years.
Yeah, and we seem to be, there's not as many of them going as long as we are. A lot of plumbers I hire, it's like, I've got this master plan that I want to be totally out of a truck and out of the field by 40. Well, I was in a truck till I was 50. Even still, every now and then I go out in the field. I don't work like I did. I can't, but I wish I could. It's like the Toby Keith song, I ain't as good as I want.
Absolutely.
But you're right. We've got a major group of plumbers that we're losing. I've got a lot of young ones that we're trying to train and coming up, but there's not near as many as we'd like.
Okay, so let's go back to opening your own company. What were you doing wrong when you first started? And I tell plumbers every day, we don't even know what we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you had worked with some people that were running a business, so you had a lot more insight. I had moved up to director of operations for a large mechanical contract. I was the director of operations over construction. And when they came in and started talking, the owners were mid-70s, early 80s, somewhere around in there.
Uh-huh.
They had decided, we're going to either give this company to our daughter or we're going to sell it. She was a nurse. And she said, okay, I'm going to take over a mechanical company. And she came in and started taking it over. And we went up to the instructor training program for the union up in Ann Arbor, up in Ypsilanti. And she sat through their service course. And, one thing they say is, look, most construction contractors are lucky to make 5%.
Mm-hmm.
In service, they can make 15 to 20. And she thought, why are we not doing service? She literally left early to come home to start putting things in place to open a service company, residential service. And I went into an executive meeting one day where she announced it, and she's talking about it. And she says, we're gonna have the best trained plumbers, and we're gonna tell everybody we have the best trained plumbers, and we're gonna tell everybody we focus on customer service. I'm like, oh my God, you're talking my language. I love this. What are you going to do to have the best trained plumbers? What training have you got in mind? She said, what do you mean? So you're going to have the best trained plumbers. How are we training them? And she said, well, Roger, all our plumbers will have a license.
That's great.
And I mean, I felt like I got hit in the head with a 2x4. And I looked at her and I said, okay, so customer service, what are you doing to train them? She says, well, Roger, we'll make sure all our plumbers know how to say please and thank you, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. And I'm like, this is the kind of BS that's going on out there today. And I knew right then, I'm in the wrong seat, in the wrong bus, going the wrong direction at the wrong time. And it wasn't much longer that I walked out and I ended up starting my company. Yours was a little opposite. You had been working around office people, owners, talking to them, telling them, look, I'm going to open my own company. And then you did it. What did you still not do right?
Oh, man. Well, the biggest failure I had was pricing. I was too good a guy. It was a mom and pop shop.
Yeah, I don't need to charge
hourly. Yeah, I was hourly. This is making me a living. I'm okay. But really, reality, it wasn't. But I had the customer service part to an extent. Although back in that day, I was cocky.
We've learned a lot about it between then and that.
I felt I was a great plumber.
You bet.
Not only that, what I felt was there was people I was like, it'll be 3 weeks before I get there. And I was a small company. I had a couple of trucks back then.
Okay, we'll wait.
And I said, and they would wait for me.
You bet.
But then, and I'd have some people that would be arguing and things like, you're just lucky to have me. That was the attitude.
Oh, yeah.
That's how cocky we were.
You the way I am.
Right.
Yes.
I'm the best plumber you can get.
Yep.
There's plumbers have to have a certain level of ego because, I know they talk about air traffic controllers and all of this. I've known several plumbers that had nervous breakdowns because you have to be thinking about, what if I have a gas leak and blow this house up? What if I have a water leak? And that can get to some people if they let it. I tell the guys, they said, well, yeah, man, that's really bothering me, David. I said, well, how do you think I feel? I'm the RMP over.
I got to worry about
over 130 of you, and I have to worry about y'all. And I said, if I let that eat me up, I would go crazy.
You bet.
But that's what it was.
So you like me, but when you turn on the TV in the morning, it talks about a gas explosion, are you like,
oh man, we didn't work on that job, didn't we?
It's like, wait, where was it at? Where, and I'm watching the ad.
You are. Absolutely. You're like, oh, I hope to goodness that wasn't one of our jobs.
Uh-huh.
Not that we're not, no, I'm terrified of those people, but I see an explosion like that, and I know immediately if it was a gas explosion, but what it looks like.
You bet.
And that's what we think about all the time is that we have to be perfect at gas. Well, so you do have to have a certain amount of ego, and that's the way I was at one time. And I'm like, you were such a jerk, David, back then. And when I joined SGI, it was a whole different thinking. It was like, you really can't treat people that way. And even though I had customers 30 years long that I had been treating, and I was friends with them, and it was nice, and I never was rude to them most time. But I say most of the time, there were some customers, as a whole owner, you're
absolutely.
I mean, as a company owner, there's certain ones that you're like, I don't care if I lose this guy or not.
Right. I'll be better off if I do lose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And but anyway, so I did a whole change when SGI talked to me. I was like, man, I really have been thinking about this wrong all along. And what you said, when I first walked into the office talking talks about selling my company to Mark and Gus, we sat there with the GM, Joe DiCario, who's a great guy. And he and I worked very closely together, and Gus and Mark. And I said, the only way we're ever going to have the company that you want, my goal and your goal are the same here. We want to grow the largest, best plumbing company and the one that takes the very best care of people, is we've got to train our people. Mm-hmm. And when I first started, I did all the training. I trained both customer service and technical training. And when I was at my company, I did all of it. And I learned all of it. I took all the classes at SGI and all of their customer service and everything. And it changed. It opened my eyes. I was like, you really weren't taking care of customers the way you thought you were. And now we do. And we bend over backwards to take care of a customer. And Milestone's the same way. And that was what it was. Is they agreed to it. I agreed to it. And like you said, she had the greatest idea back then of, I'm going to go service. I'm going to have the most license. But boy,
absolutely,
don't we know that having a license doesn't mean you're a good plumber?
It doesn't mean you're the best trained either.
No, not at all.
It means you passed a test.
Exactly.
One time.
And not to say there's not some great licensed plumbers, but I've known apprentices that know as much as a master.
Oh, yeah.
And I've known masters that were incredible. But the license doesn't make the man as a plumber.
It's really neat because Lynn Speak helped get me into the union after I'd been open shop 17 years. And during that 17 years, I'd done commercial, residential, service, new construction. I'd done a little bit of all of it. And I wanted to get back into commercial. So I called Lynn and said, hey, you know anybody hiring commercial plumbers? He said, yeah. He said, the union. I'm like, they're not going to hire me. He said, yeah, they will. And when I got hired, this video is sponsored by Leak Pro. Go check out leak-pro.com. They hired 60 plumbers that were recruiting. Brought in 60 plumbers into the union in 97. And I remember seeing Joe Hall, who was doing the recruiting, a year later, and he said, you're one of 2 plumbers left out of the 60 that we hired.
Wow.
A lot of them couldn't cut it. A lot of them didn't like the union politics. A lot of them didn't like paying union dues. And I mean, it's like, look, I'm making more money now than I ever have. Almost wish I wouldn't have gone union, just gone on back then, opened my own company and said, hey, here's what I'm going to do. But I went to the union. I saw Joe a year later. He said, you're the only one left. Out of 60 plumbers, only 1 stayed in. And the union's not for everybody. I get that. But what I loved was the education. I became a med gas plumber.
Yep.
Then I went over to Grant's office one day and Austin was there, and Austin says, "Hey, little brother," says, "You got your master license yet?" And I'm like, "God, no, why?" He said, "Well, all of us did. We just kind of figured you would." And it's like,
now
peer pressure, and did. So it's like, okay, well, what I got to do to become a master plumber? And I started studying it and did that. And well, then of course I already had my journeyman med gas. So now I guess I need my master med gas. And so I got all the endorsements, and I realized then I love learning.
Uh-huh.
And then when we started our own business, now tell me this, how did you find out about SGI?
Well, SGI had been kind of sending me a lot, hounding me, sending me a lot of information. And at the point I joined SGI, I was at that point, I was like, my wife and I were struggling. We were like, man, I'm working my butt off and I'm not making what I should be making. I don't feel like. And I kept getting these things sent to me. So I went to what they used to call back then profit days.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I remember.
Yep. And you'd go to a hotel and they'd have 20, 30, 40 guys.
Where'd you go? What hotel did you go to? Was it
the Embassy Suites here in Dallas over at George Bush and 183.
Julie and I flew down to Houston after the hurricane. We didn't even know if we could get in. I'm calling them like, look, I've got to come. Are y'all having this class or not? And they're like, well, we think we can get into the hotel. We're not sure. It's like, were the planes able to land? It's like, how bad is it? And literally when we were at the hotel, half the rooms were taken by Air National Guard. They're still salvaging people and houses and pets and furniture. And just, it's like, wow. So it was a trip, but I decided I have to go to this.
Yeah. And that's what we were. We got to change something. Either I need to change my company or I'm going to go to work for someone else. And I'd been in business 20 years at that point.
Okay.
At Butler Plumbing.
And I'd only been in business 2 years.
Yeah. And so it's not that I wouldn't make it, but 20 years, you mentioned earlier about, well, how did you know how to run a business? Well, you make a lot of mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
And you learn from them and they cost you a lot of money.
Uh-huh.
But you keep on going and keep on going.
So before we go any further, in your words, what is the best practice group? Because that's what SGI is. Well, had never heard of.
Yeah, they have Nexstar, and there's SGI and there's
Service Nation. There's 3 or 4 of them.
They all teach a similar philosophy.
Mm-hmm. Raise your prices.
Absolutely. And it's not just raise your prices, it's get priced correctly.
Figure out what your price should be.
Exactly. Figure your costs.
You bet.
And then how much profit do you want to make?
You bet.
Period. That's all there is to it.
Mm-hmm.
And some customer, and we even have customer complaints sometimes we take on that way, and we're like, well, you understand the only way we can stay in business and continue to take care of you is if we make a profit.
You bet.
Not a large one, but we struggle to make just that you talked about a minute ago, 15%. It is very difficult. In fact, we rarely hit it regularly to hit 15% profit.
But when I walked in and talked to Gus today, he said, what's your profit look like? I said, to be honest, we're running about 13% profit, but I'm spending it because I'm investing it in social media. He says, I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? Because I figured Rebecca would tell me, look, if you ain't making 15%, you're not doing things right. She said, you're in growth mode.
Yeah.
She said, he said, Gus said, you're growing.
Yeah.
He says, that doesn't bother me at all. He said, your numbers don't look bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, a lot of companies are running 1-2% profit, if they're not operating in the red and a loss every year. So how did I hear about SGI? I went to the profit days, and the thing was this. They started telling me, I had a guy, his name was Carl. I think they just told me Carl got hired back. And I don't know if you know too, but finally Milestone bought into part of SGI.
You bet.
They're part owner of it.
Jimmy Dale. Yeah, there's a few people that did.
Yeah, and some of the larger companies bought into it. And part of it was changing structure at the top, and they wanted to make sure that there was still a group out there to help independent contractors become the best they can be, not just the big corporate people. So we purchased into it, and at that profit day, they told me how much it was going to cost. It was like $250 a week plus $25,000 to invest in it.
So sign up.
And all of this, and I'm like, that much money right now. I said, let me just put it this way. You better have a good system, because I'm not going to be able to pay for all of this if your system doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm willing to go wholeheartedly and trust your system and not question it. And that was the thing I saw the most, is people questioned the system. They'd go in and try and change it.
Oh, I'm going to do everything, but I'm not raising my
but
prices.
I'm not doing this, and I'm not.
I'm not going to wrap my vans.
And I'm like,
I'm not going to get a price book.
Yeah. I'm like, they've got it figured out.
You bet.
Do what they say, follow the recipe. Don't pick and choose what you want to do. And I did that, and it made me tremendously successful, which ultimately led to me selling my company to Milestone. Because not just because we met, but because the processes I put in place, the way I operated,
Same way they wanted to go.
it was a very easy transit. My price guide looked like their price guide.
Same with me and Rescue Air. It's like, okay, we're on the same page on a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, it was.
But I'm not a numbers
easy.
guy. I'm not a numbers guy. I remember walking in and talking to Josh, and Josh like, bring me over your numbers and all this and all this. And like I slid one piece of paper over like 3-4 columns of numbers.
Yeah.
And he said, what is this? I said, that's my numbers. He says, well, I'm looking for like profit and loss, taxes, and this. I said, look, this is my numbers. Here's what I do a year. Here's what I do a year. Here's what I do a year. My numbers are increasing. We should be running 15 to 20%. So I see my valuation as this. He's like, wow. I said, Josh, look, I'm not a numbers guy. I'm not a accountant, a bookkeeper. You asked me to see my numbers. This is the way I see them.
Yep.
He said, man, this is brutal honesty. I said, it's what you get. And that's how we negotiated the company. It's like, here's where we're at. Let's start right here.
Yeah.
And they teach you. They've got coaches to help teach you things like that. Patty, who used to do the accounting for SGI, she's the one that come in and teach. Amazing. I could talk to that lady all day, every day. So smart, so intelligent. But again, what all does a best practice group do?
They teach you the customer service. They teach you budgeting. They teach you everything. They teach you an overhaul of your company. They do not get into teaching you how to do plumbing.
You bet.
They don't teach you how to do electrical. They're not technical.
It's not up their alley. You bet.
So that's the whole point about it. It's how you teaching you. It's like that. I talked earlier this morning about how they used to require a course for the master's course here. 1 week or 40 hours, whatever for that. It's just that past a lot more, but you invest in yourself. You're asking that company to teach you about it. And that means you want to learn how to run this business properly.
And here's the thing, and we talked about Gus and Jimmy Dale both being part owners of it. They do things right. And these are the people that are helping tell you how to do things right.
Yep.
I remember the very first one, because when we went to Profit Day, they said, okay, we've got this thing called EP. It's next week, but we'll put y'all on the next one. And then 2 weeks later, there's Expo. It's in Orlando, but you'll get to go in 6 months. And, I remember getting up and Julia's sitting here talking to the Profit Day, and they both get to that point where it's, and I'm sitting here because I understand. So it's like, okay, I know we're to the point. Neither one of y'all are going to say another word. We're going to get up and we're going to walk around and we'll make a decision and we'll come back. I said, okay. So we get up and walk out the side door and we walk around out front and we're walking down. I knew there was a pool down here. So we're going to walk down there and sit down for a minute. And we're walking and I'm just thinking, I said, look, can we afford this?
Yeah, that's the question.
And I look over at her and tears are running down her eyes. And she says, if we don't afford, if we can't afford this, we're not going to be able to stay in business. And I'm like, wow. She said, you've already made up your mind. She says, we've got to learn this stuff. And I'm like, wow. So we walked back in. I said, okay, here's the deal. We're going to sign up. But I'm going to EP next week and Expo in 2 weeks. I can't wait.
Yep.
And he said, I'll see if I can make that happen. I said, if it doesn't happen, we're not doing this. I'm letting you know right now. I don't want to wait I don't want to pay you $25,000 and wait 6 months.
Oh, absolutely.
To learn.
And that happened exactly. Gus and I both signed up the same month, December of 2014. And, not 2014, 2004. 2004, we both joined. Well, both went to a Profit Day in December. And we went to our first, you call it, I can't remember what you call the first week.
Executive Perspective.
Executive Perspective.
Yeah.
We signed up in December. We went January 1 or right after January 1st to Houston and spent a week going through crash course classes.
And that's funny because when I went to Houston to sign up, EP was here. They had already moved the offices to Dallas or Madison. So it was great. And
you're exactly right in that way because it was that may be one of the hardest decisions I ever made in my life to go to that because my wife and I were both like, how can you, like you said, how can we afford this?
It's a lot of money.
We can't even pay our bills.
You bet.
And I said, well, can we afford not to? This is either do or die.
That was Julie's mindset. Hey, if we don't do this, we're not in business. Yeah. We're not going to be.
and I wouldn't take it back for anything.
Yeah.
It was the best decision we ever made.
Yeah.
And again, they teach you along that with SGI too, is that at some point you want an exit strategy. I exited a little earlier than I ever planned. I'd rather been selling my company at 70, but not necessarily because selling it at the point in time I did, now I've gone from what I was a 6-truck Butler plumbing company to we're a 70-truck company in Milestone. And, I've got 120 plus plumbers that I work with every day that are great guys, and the best management team and the ownership that I could even dream to work with to, as a team, build that.
Did you, by any chance, keep any ownership, any percentage, anything at all?
I didn't. At the point in time I was it, and a lot of guys do.
Luckily, man, like I said, my first coach was Michael Gerber, the E-Myth. And one of the things that he taught when we were doing our coaching, consulting, and all that is exit plan. But his is always, look, if you're selling to a company that's bigger that is going to go, keep a percentage. He talks about 11%. No, nobody's going to let you keep 11%. Not when you're that small and they're that big.
And I should have done that.
Amazing.
I usually should have.
Amazing. Yep. Yeah, it was a good deal. Now, you didn't just sell and walk away, though. You sold because part of it, you wanted to be part of it.
Well, originally it was just a year. In fact, kind of surprised him. I said, I'll stay a year. We'll get you established, get people in place. They actually had some people in the company. I think they thought we're going to, step into my position after I left. I'll be the RMP the first year. We'll see how it goes. And I did sell it based on, I didn't get lump sum payout. I got paid by, you're going to make sure that you get this company going and my plumbing company going. And I said, no problem. I know I can do that. So I came on board. I said, we contract in, I'll be there a year. And at the end of a year, I'm like, we're growing really well. I like it here. I brought over my general manager, who was a great guy at that time, that allowed me to, and one thing you said a minute ago, I'm not a numbers guy. I hate doing numbers. I'm a mechanic. I'm a technician. I like working with my hands. I like teaching that. I can do accounting. It's like taking a beating. But if somebody can put the numbers in front of me, I can tell you what's going on and what we need to do. Mm-hmm. But I like someone else to assemble all that. And you give me a sheet and let me look at it.
Let
you
me
tell me what's going on. Yeah. And you give me that. And I told them that up front. I said, I don't want to be the guy that sits there and crunches all the numbers all day long and does that. Now you give me the numbers and I'll say, well, okay, well, this is what I can work out to fix that. And that's what they understood. And I did. I had some really good people. And then one of the guys I brought over was one of the guys that helped me do that for the first year. He ended up moving on after that. So after the first year, I said, I'm not where I want to be yet. I don't have this company where I want it to be, and I'd like to stay. And I said, I'd like to stay indefinitely. This is my goal. I want to build this into the premier company of the Metroplex. And I said, well, you can stay here as long as you want to, David, basically.
Good deal.
And that's how they've treated me since then and taken very good care of me. And I treat this company as if it was 100% my own. I believe in it that way. Mm-hmm. And of course, my license is on all the trucks too. So I'm a little more hands-on than a lot of RMPs. A lot of RMPs never even seen. My guys always tell me when I hire some in from other companies, like, I only met the RMP one time at our company. We see you in class and everything else all the time. Some of them, maybe I'm overly involved too much, but I believe the RMP has a responsibility to make sure that the plumbing's done at a company properly.
You bet.
Not just be a number on a truck.
Yeah, when I went into Rescue Air, I was there for about 4 to 6 months before they hired another service manager, let him try to run things. He didn't do very well, hired another one in, and then moved everything over to his RMP. And I'm like, man, that makes it easy for me. So many good things about selling a business, but then still being able to be part of it. Uh-huh. Because I've got to watch, Texas Green Plumbing go to Rescue Air, so Rescue Air and Plumbing, and then, man, they're looking at just growing it again. You said that you wanted to stay another year or stay longer because it wasn't where you wanted it to be. Is it where you want it to be now?
No, not at all.
Isn't that funny? Yeah. And how many years ago is that?
Yeah, 8 years. Well, I'm going on 9 years. It'll be 9 years December since we started the plumbing division at Milestone.
What are the changes? What would you do right now? And I saw an interview of Kat Cole one time. She was the CEO of Cinnabon, moved up from Hooters waitress to the CEO of Cinnabon. Okay. And one thing she said, every quarter, I think, And she's got it on her calendar. She walks in her office, dims the lights, shuts the door, and nobody bothers her. And she walks in and says, okay, if they fired me today and hired a new CEO, and he walked in here, looking at the way we're set up right now, what would he change? What would he do? Who would he fire? Who would he say we need to hire? And she says, I sat here all day in this mindset. And I heard that and I was like, oh my God, that is phenomenal. Because I look at me and there's times I'd be like, okay, number one, fire you, Roger. You're not doing everything that needs to be done in here every day. And I, okay, what do I need to do then? And then you look around, okay, would they keep this manager? No, I'm having so many problems with that manager that they'd cut him loose immediately. And okay, but who would we hire? Well, we've been talking about hiring a social media person for 6 months now. They'd hire them. And she sits down and makes a list. And she's like, if they brought in a new CEO today, these are the changes he would make to make things better. She says, the next day I do that.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, wow. What changes would you make?
Well, fortunately, Milestone's such a large company, my scope of work's a lot narrower than that. As far as, Gus has that conversation with himself is what he has to do.
Bet.
My conversation is, what can I do to make this plumbing department better?
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing about it is, I have to say right now, I've gone through a lot of people. One of the first guys I hired, when I hired him, the day I hired him, I said, you're going to be my first service manager. And because I was only one at first, when we first started.
You bet.
And he was a great service manager for a long time. And then we grew and added more and more. Now we've got 7 service managers not under me, but I work alongside.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Allison is our plumbing operations director. Odd thing about him, he started as an electrician. He came up as an electrician in Milestone. Was head of the electrical department as far as their electrical operations manager. And we moved him over to the plumbing operations manager because he knew how all of it worked at Milestone well. And he's incredible, done a great job. And actually, he was probably the guy that was going to do my job if I left in a year.
Right.
That would have been put in my position at that time. And then I just messed everything up. But
it's a pain when you want to stay and work, isn't it?
Really, it is. And so I've gone through a lot of managers. I've sat there and I've got, this guy's just not working out. I really shouldn't have this manager here, or we shouldn't have this manager. We shouldn't have a plumber in the field, that sort of thing. So we do sit down and we look at it that way. I can honestly say right now, it's the best team I've ever seen put together that we had. And it takes a while to get it to gel.
Oh, yeah.
And after 8 years, every one of the managers in my office right now were plumbers in the field at Milestone.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. And Scott was an electrician in the field. That's odd. Usually you end up having to hire someone from outside.
You bet.
To do some of that. But they're doing the numbers. They're doing all of it. Coaching. We've changed recently. We're doing huge things now as one-on-one coaching on site. So when the technician's out there on the job and they get some problem with a customer, you coach that guy through that call. Even sometimes the manager will talk to the customer themselves and try and do whatever we can to close that call and make sure that we get that customer taken care of that day. Because they've already taken off work. We're already there.
You bet.
But as far as that goes right now, definitely, you always sit back and take a look at that. But I can honestly say right now, there's not a single person I would change in our setup. And that is rare because there's always been somebody ever since I've been there that I'm like, I can see we need to get someone else in this position. He's just not going to make it. And it doesn't happen that way very often. And I'm sure, give it a year, this is going to change because someone's going to leave. I'm going to lose one of these guys as part of the team. And that's just the nature of business. You can't fix that.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to change. Just like my goal of getting where I'm at has definitely not been a straight line of wanting to make the largest, best plumbing company in the Metroplex. Boy, it's been one crooked river going through.
Oh, I get that.
And that's what you've got to do. You're always adjusting to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I like that.
And so I know I'm still adjusting a lot, and I'll have to adjust a lot more before I quit at Milestone or retire.
So let me ask you this, and this is changing it up a little bit, but how do we get more people into the trades?
Man.
If you're enjoying the Trade Talks, hit that subscribe or follow button, which helps us produce this awesome blue-collar content absolutely free. And now, back to the episode.
Because what Milestone offers, sometimes I even look back at what we offer guys. I'm like, are we really offering a guy that knows nothing about plumbing all of this?
You bet.
And we do. We're trying to get so many people in trades. We're offering, we offer tools, we offer insurance, we offer training that nobody can get. You get paid while you're getting trained to be a plumber's apprentice that no other companies can offer. And I know some can't. Milestone is in a position that they have been in business long enough and that they have the ability to invest in training.
Y'all's training center is bigger than most companies. It is. I'm being honest.
When we had that training center, we had a smaller division training center that we had that was a house. We literally built a house inside a warehouse, roof and all. And we were working on it, but it was like a 2-bedroom house.
Mm-hmm.
And I started off with 4 guys in a class 4 years ago. In fact, 2 of those guys actually are my managers now, which is awesome. The training room we had to share with HVAC. And I got that. It worked out that I ended up getting 1 day a week in the house and they got 4 days. I said, how is this fair? I'm getting treated like a stepchild here. And I said, I want my own training room. I said, I got to have it if we're going to take this to the next level. And again, Gus supported me 100%, Gus and Joe and Mark. And they said, well, you're right, we do. And then they were like, well, how are we going to do this training room? What are we going to do? We looked for a year trying to figure out where to build it because we wanted to build it in a place that we didn't have to move it. And then I said, who's going to build it? What? I said, I got a design right here. I'm going to design it. I know what I want. I don't want something that's a house. I want a training facility, everything functional. I took it out from my lawn sprinkler days and commercial days. I literally drew it. I submitted to City of Garland, got the COs, everything. I designed it, had to do the drawings for it, scale and everything. And then I took my class of 8 plumbers, 8 apprentices, and we built it, the framing, everything. And we built it in place and put it together. And that was all only could happen because Milestone was willing to invest in their own future of training the plumbers.
I love that.
And so we've got that training facility now. We use it every single day to teach in. And it by far is probably one of the best investments we've made. And but it is. It's something that not every company could do by any means. Even when I was at my company, at Butler Plumbing Company, I trained weekly, 3 to 4 times a week in the mornings. But I didn't have the hands-on ability for a guy to go over here and tear a toilet apart or tear a tankless apart or or troubleshoot a water heater. And I can create all those things with this. Even a slab leak under the slab, we've got installed in the slab where we busted it out. And it's hard for other companies to do that, but they can do some training, which most of them don't. We're taking it to another level, trying to get, again, to build the best plumbing company and to take care of the customers the best, you have to have the best plumbers.
Completely agree.
And like that girl said, oh, well, they've got a license. That doesn't mean a thing. I've got licensed plumbers that are outstanding water heater installers and don't know at all how to repair one.
Yep. So
it's really come a long way. And that's, again, I keep going back to it, but the fact that Gus and Mark were willing to invest in that from the get-go. And I probably wouldn't have sold my company to them if they hadn't told me that from the beginning, that they weren't willing to invest in that. It's just gone to a level that I never expected we could get to.
So if someone listening is in the Dallas area, Dallas, Fort Worth, y'all are all over the Metroplex. Plumbing, electrical, HVAC. I know y'all do a lot more things, but that's
our primary.
You bet.
Yeah.
If somebody is listening and is totally green and think, man, I've been listening to Roger for a while, I want to get into plumbing, maybe a great opportunity. How do they come to work for Milestone?
Everything's online. They can go online, see if we're hiring at that time for plumbers. And usually we are hiring most all the time. Milestone's never going to stop growing.
Right.
We're not going to get to a point and go, oh, we're there, let's stop.
Yeah.
It's always growing, and it does go up and down. So we're usually always hiring. And you can fill out an application. If you meet the criteria, then we get an interview. We go from there. Sometimes we're hiring green plumbers, sometimes that have never done a thing, and electrical and HVAC. Sometimes we're looking for guys that have 1,000 hours or 800 or something of that nature. Sometimes we're looking for guys that have licenses. tradesman or journeyman.
And we're all looking for that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most people, a lot of companies don't want to hire green people because they don't have time to train them. I love that y'all are set up like that. Yeah, most people either want, look, I want you right before you're ready to take your tradesman exam or right after you got your license.
And the sad thing is a lot of plumbers don't want to mess with green apprentices.
I loved it.
I did too. I was always a teaching plumber. There's plumbers out there that love to teach and are great teachers, and there's plumbers out there that are just like, leave me alone. You can either do it. I don't want to mess with you. You go work on this part of my job. I'll work on this part. And that really bothers me because I always tell them it's like the Lion King. It's the cycle of life with plumbers. We have to be teachers as plumbers.
You bet.
And more
people need to do it, and more people don't.
And that's one of the reasons we wanted to do the training facility, because so many plumbers nowadays don't want to teach.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about, and it can sometimes, if they're teaching, it slows them down. They may not make as much money on the job.
Right.
Because basically the plumber's doing the same thing that we're doing. They're investing in that young man to make his job go faster.
But eventually that guy's going to be able to go out with them and help him make more money.
Exactly. And
the better you teach him, the more he can help you make. Yeah.
That's the problem, is not all the plumbers see that out there. They just see the small picture that's right in front of them, not the big picture. And again, the big picture is, if we train these guys from the start and they know more and are well-rounded, and granted, we do home residential service, 1 and 2 family dwellings. We don't do apartments. We don't do condos.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we throw a condo in there every now and then, but that's one division of plumbing.
You bet.
Lord knows, I don't teach any commercial plumbing, and I know commercial, but
or industrial.
I don't teach, med gas. We don't do med gas at Milestone. We don't do anything like that.
Man, I used to be one of the only med gas service plumbers in Dallas.
Yeah.
I mean, Dennis would call me and it'd be like, I called 50 companies.
And I did med gas for years prior to the med gas license.
Yeah.
I used to work for dental contractors, just doing dental offices.
Okay.
But when I did residential service, I'm like, I really don't have a need for that. It'd be just a waste of my time and money to do it.
Yep.
And so I teach just residential service. I don't teach new construction. So I do to an extent. One thing that has come about, we started recently that I love, and I got this idea from the state. I have a 3D printer now. I print all plumbing fittings, and I teach them on plumbing fittings. I can literally teach a guy to plumb a house sitting at his desk by doing a drawing up on a whiteboard. And I've never had that, because our service plumbers, they've never had any new construction.
No, I get it. I'm having a dollhouse built. I'm bringing the dollhouse in and the fittings and everything.
And I use your video an awful lot, where you went down to Waco and recorded that.
Absolutely.
No recordings do we have of a true dollhouse, but you got in there before they had it open.
No, I got lucky. I literally asked Frank Denton before we got open. I said, "Can I video in here?" He said, "Absolutely." I walked in there and Jimmy Bibb had the instructors from the state board were like, "You can't video in here." I was like, "I've already asked Frank."
Yeah. And
are you sure?
They wouldn't let.
Are you sure?
I just wanted to take some pictures for my guys to show them. So what I do is I use your video in my class, and I say, "This is what it looks like," and it takes so much anxiety off.
It does, because when I walked in, all I heard was a dollhouse.
Yeah,
and I'm looking at my little sister's dollhouses, and I'm thinking, I'm gonna have to plumb something like that.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what I thought. So and then you walk in, you sit, and it's like, oh,
yeah. And so these guys have never done that. So now I actually teach them. I took it another step further. I don't teach them how to do a dollhouse. I give them different scenarios, and I teach them how to wet vent and flat vent and how to rough a house.
You bet.
I even made the little blocks for graduated fall so that they can rough a house. They don't even do it with the house. I lay out a scale on the table, and they measure the scale, and they just build it up to a 2-story plumbing.
I love it.
And it works awesome. And I got that idea from there. So we print all our own fittings and have a stock of them so I can teach them how to build a house. But, we have industrial plumbing and commercial plumbing, and there's so many facets of plumbing to learn. And I was fortunate enough I got to learn a lot of it starting in commercial and pipe fitting and all of that. But anyhow, it's been a blessing to be at Milestone and to sell my company. And, sometimes we just have guidance to go the right direction.
You bet. Well, this has been fun. One last question. At least that's the plan right now. The day you graduated high school and walked out to go to work plumbing, when you came home from college, let's just say
Well, he was going to local college, so I was working right here, going plumbing at the same time.
Yeah, well, let's just say the day you walked out your front door after graduating high school, if you could go back and stand on that front porch right now when little David comes walking out, what advice would you give him?
Man, I wish I'd have been able to join SGI like the first year I started a company. I grew up believing if you work hard, you can make it happen. And that's true to an extent. There's a lot of things that have to go into place along with that. You have to have a lot of help along the way, a lot of people involved. Man, what advice would I give me? I mean, the one thing is never give up. Keep on going. I mean, I didn't, but I see that happen with a lot of people. There was a lot of times I was ready to cash it in and just stop doing this anymore.
Medical school sounded pretty good, didn't it?
It did. You know, the one thing about medical school is back then I thought, well, gosh, I love my wife so much. We had never been apart and we never have been much at all. And I was like, man, if I go to medical school, I'm going to possibly have to be away from her 2 and 3 days at a time. It's like being a fireman.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know, residency and all of that, being away from her and all the hours that we won't be able to see each other. And then I became a service plumber, and it still happened.
There you go. Yeah. Gone 2 or 3 days at a time anyway. Yeah.
But, you know, and I said, so plumbing looks like a really good profession. And the thing about it is it always has been. I never regret one moment going into plumbing and not being in the medical field. But there's a lot of mistakes I made. I wish I would have known a lot of things that I didn't know that I had to make mistakes to find out. I wish I would have had somebody. I didn't know anybody that, even though I was familiar with the office, I knew nothing about running a business.
Right.
I'd only been in the office just to do drawings and stuff of that nature. I didn't know any of the accounting. I didn't know any of the taxes, the laws, the payroll. And, you know, that's one thing I always said. That's one thing. I have a lot of headaches at Milestone, but I always said the very hardest thing for an employer to do is meet payroll on Friday.
Man.
That's the one thing. And because you're responsible for all those people.
Mm-hmm. Every one of them. Not just them, their families.
That's exactly. Everything about their families, their kids, all of it. But as far as changing anything, I wish I would have, you know, there's some mistakes I made that I would have wished I'd have had better training on. Maybe back then too, studied a little more. When I got older, I started finding everything out. I would study everything about everything. When I was younger at 25, I was fumbling through it and making the mistake and then, you know, ask forgiveness instead of permission on stuff.
You bet.
And so I can't complain about anything, though. I don't know I would have changed a whole lot of it.
Good.
So maybe some of the things, being able to spend a little more time with my family, but I was able to spend a lot of time with my family. I spent a lot of time with my daughter and her business, and she's a singer, and so that also sidetracked my company a little bit because her singing career was my peewee football, little league, soccer that everybody has with their kids. So, you know, once you have kids, that changes.
It all changes.
Yep.
Good stuff. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. Appreciate it.